Good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a beautiful day at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. Welcome to worship. I'm Reverend Abhi Janamanchi, one of the ministers serving this liberal religious community where love works. Our mission is to explore the eternal nurture community and build a more just world, so that together we might embody Dr. King's vision of the beloved community.
Please know that whoever you are, wherever you're from, whomever you love, and whatever your gender identity, life circumstances, or immigration status, you are welcome here.
And I'd like to extend a special welcome to those who are joining our service online, whether in the moment or catching up with us later. We're glad to have you with us. Why don't we just turn towards that camera, wave, say hi, welcome, whatever you wish to do. Welcome. It's great to have you with us. And if you're new to Cedar Lane, we have a small gift for you. If you feel comfortable doing so, please raise your hand so we may see, welcome, and recognize you. All right, I see a few brave souls who are willing to be recognized. Our guests this morning, welcome. Let us all offer them a warm Cedar Lane welcome. We're glad to have you with us.
Please join us after the service for coffee and conversation. If you choose to use a yellow mug, our members and friends will be sure to greet you.
Because at Cedar Lane, yellow means?
Welcome.
Hello, indeed. I'd like to draw your attention at this time to the insert in your order of celebration. You'll see from the rich variety of opportunities that we are an active and engaged religious community that is committed to spiritual development as well as community engagement and nurturing our religious community. So I just would like to just quickly highlight the wonderful talk we have scheduled later today at 5:30 with Mohanji, a visiting spiritual teacher from India, who will be speaking about peace and positivity. I think two things that we could use more of in these times. So I hope you'll join us here in the sanctuary at 5:30. Also, a couple of quick things. Next week is our annual blessing of the backpacks during the service, when we bless backpacks of children, youth, and adults who are starting a new school year or a new job, whatever it is. Please bring your backpacks to be blessed during worship. And of course, September 9th, we go back to two services, which happen to be at 9 and 11. I'm glad we still remember those. Wonderful. And we begin with our water communion ritual. So please bring waters that you may have collected from your summer travels or from the kitchen sink or even from your neighbor's yard, which would be fun, wouldn't it? Anyway, I also would like to take this opportunity to recognize and welcome a special guest this morning who will not be a guest very soon. Our intern minister, Kristen Green, is here with us this morning with her moms, Cynthia and Rita. Kristen? Kristen is a Unitarian Universalist. She's a member of the Rockville UU congregation, which, we always happen to be stealing the best people from Rockville, so I'm thrilled. And she goes to Wesley Seminary and finished her first year of internship at our UU congregation in Arlington, and this year we're blessed to have her as our intern minister. Kristen will especially be focusing on growing and developing our young adult ministry, which I'm really excited about. So if you are a young adult, please know that you will be working with Kristen this year. So welcome, Kristen. And today we share our plate with Action in Montgomery, AIM, which is one of the community-based organizations that Cedar Lane has been involved in since its inception more than 20 years ago. To share a little bit more about AIM and its mission and its work, I'd like to welcome Bob Essink, who serves on the AIM core team. Welcome, Bob. And Bob will share a brief testimonial.
Very brief.
Yep, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Many of you know that our partnership with AIM is one way that Cedar Lane gives us to fulfill our social justice responsibilities. Through AIM's action-oriented community organizing, we have an opportunity to help make our county a better place for all to live and thrive. For those of you who are not familiar with AIM, it is a broad-based community power organization that is nonpartisan and multi-faith. Because of the support from Cedar Lane and 22 other member congregations, AIM works for change in this county by bringing the needs of underrepresented residents to the attention of county officials. AIM then gains a commitment from these officials and holds them accountable to act on their commitments. I wasn't aware of AIM until we joined Cedar Lane about a year ago, but have since volunteered at a number of their actions, and I've had the opportunity to see needs in this county that I didn't know existed. Among those are unrepresented immigrants, students attending schools that are in disrepair, and families searching for housing that's generally unaffordable. As an example of their work, AIM brought together over 1,200 people from the member congregations and county executive candidates in late May to ask these candidates for their support of a strong social justice agenda. Cedar Lane was well represented with over 40 people attending, and Reverend Abhi did the hard work by publicly asking each of these county executive candidates for their support to implement solutions, if elected. We now have more work that needs your support, holding these new county executives, this new county executive accountable to implement these commitments. Our friends at AIM will put your gifts towards important social justice issues that are consistent with Cedar Lane's priorities. As important, AIM needs your volunteer time and attendance at these events to show your support. If you do volunteer at one of their actions, I guarantee you'll understand the social justice needs in this community much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
In this caring community, the pastoral visitors are an extension of the ministry team. Kathleen Holmay is today's on-call pastoral visitor. They will be available after the service at the Joys and Sorrows Candles table. Please reach out to her or to them if you would like support after the service. And now, let us experience the joyous, loving community that is Cedar Lane. Please rise and greet your neighbors.
Let us center ourselves, inviting our mind, body, and spirit into this space made sacred by our presence and the presence of the Holy that is known by many names, that resides within, among, and through, in which we live, move, breathe and have our being. Let us open our hearts to love,
our minds to reason,
our souls to joy,
and our lives to service.
Amazed by the miracle of life,
Grateful for the gift of community,
inspired by the power of living faith,
we are here gathered.
come, let us worship together.
As Michael Benefield kindles the chalice, symbol of our gathered community, I invite you to stand in body and or in spirit to share in unison the words printed in your order of celebration. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our power to seek with honesty, to heal with love, to help with compassion, to bless with joy, to serve the spirit of justice in the fullness of community. Please remain standing in body and or in spirit to sing number 347, Gather the Spirit, in your gray hymnal.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour, of revolution's light, appear all the same. Gather in praise, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, find seeds for the soul are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter in spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
This morning, in this special ritual of recognition, we acknowledge the role of worship associates in our congregation. These are trained lay leaders who collaborate closely with the ministers and the worship team to develop, support, and help lead Sunday morning worship. Our worship associates make an important 3-year commitment to the congregation when they take up this sacred task. They are, in a very real sense, representatives of our congregation and our faith, as they learn more about worship in the Unitarian Universalist tradition and context, and offer their particular gifts and sensibilities to the creation and conduct of worship. We attest to the enormous value they bring not only to worship, but to our lives as well, and their presence and participation deepens, diversifies, and enriches our collective worship experience. So today, we dedicate and commission the worship associate team. But before we do, I would like to recognize and thank David Devlin Foltz, Ellen Kelly. Is Ellen here today? I guess not. And Barbara Warman, who completed 3 years as worship associates. Now, all three were unable to be here this morning, so we recognize them in absentia and thank them for their many wonderful contributions and gifts that they brought to our worship experience for the past 3 years. But we also believe that once a worship associate, always a worship associate. Right, Michael? Yes, sir. Indeed. So, David, Barb, and Ellen now join a growing assemblage or a cloud of witnesses of experienced worship leaders. Now, 7 worship associates are continuing to serve actively. Mary Farrar, Carolyn Morrissey, Ezra Town, Cami Boyle, who is not here with us this morning, Val Carter, Wangari Kamau, and Michael Torrin. And joining this awesome group are our new worship associates, Dominic Manzella, who is our youth worship associate, and I don't think Dominic is here with us either, Leslie Wasson, Stephanie Williams, and Jared Wilson. See what I mean? This is an awesome group, and it's truly been a joy. We had our retreat earlier in the summer, and it was just a wonderful experience being with them and starting to explore the aspects of UU worship and actually develop the sense of team building and also make some plans and commitments for this year. So welcome. So, friends, on this day, we commission you as the Cedar Lane Worship Associate Team. We honor the important ministry you share with us and ask if you are ready to fulfill your responsibilities of being worship associates for the upcoming year. Do you commit to engage in this ministry with joy, openness, and integrity, upholding the values and principles of our Unitarian Universalist faith in celebration and service of life, and to basically pledge your life to Cedar Lane? There you go. In affirmation of your call to serve, we recognize and commission you with joy and gratitude to offer your gifts of creativity and authenticity, to model commitment to our vision and our mission and our ministry, and to join this ministry team in the shared ministry of worship. May it be so. Welcome and thank you. That was me. Oh, no.
We gather in this sacred space of community to find strength, the spiritual, emotional, and even physical strength to face the many challenges of our lives. We gather in this sacred space of community to be held as we grieve and as we celebrate. When I hold up my arms, I invite you to say, "We hold you in our hearts." If you are living through the small and extraordinary milestones of life,
we hold you in our hearts.
If parenting is your spiritual practice,
we hold you in our hearts.
If you live with or care for someone with grief or chronic pain,
we hold you in our hearts.
If you are struggling with illnesses, seen and unseen, with mental illness or addictions,
we hold you
in our hearts. If you have suffered abuse or injustice, we hold you in our hearts. We hold in our hearts the Reverend Archene Turner and Mary Means as they mourn the loss of Reverend Archene's father, Reverend Archibald Turner. Cards are appreciated. Raju Singh, who lost his father, Prabal Singh, to cancer last week. Cards are also appreciated. We send healing wishes to Reverend Katie's Aunt Anita as she prepares for surgery in Florida. We celebrate with the son of Cedar Lane member Michael Benefield, David, and his partner Claire, who welcomed their daughter, Dorothy Eleanor Benak, on Thursday, August 9th. And with Cedar Lane members Perry and Diane Seifert, who welcomed their second grandson on August 12th. Otto Benjamin Seifert is the first child of Alla and Andrew Seifert, who live nearby. May these friends of ours, our companions in the world, and all that lives unspoken in our hearts, be held in the embrace of prayer and by a love that will not let us go. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane to others whose lives are lost and whose lives are impacted by violence and calamities in our world. We remember Telia Nanabu Mack, a transgender person who was murdered 9 years ago today. We pray for all the victims and their families in Kerala, India, for the safety and well-being of all those who were displaced from their homes, and for those engaged in the vital work of relief, recovery, and rebuilding. We pray for the more than 500 children who continue to be separated from their parents. We pray for all the people and the animals and the earth itself. And we mourn the passing of Senator John McCain after a year-long struggle with brain cancer. We honor his sacrifice, his integrity, and his commitment to truth.
Let us now center ourselves for a time of prayer, reflection, or meditation. Let us open our minds and our hearts to the power of healing that is within and among us. Let us open ourselves to the Spirit of life and love that moves in us and through us, and that we encounter every moment of our lives. Would you join me in the spirit of prayer? Spirit of life and love, known by many names, yet by no name fully known, we gather today with hopes and dreams and also with fears and wounds. Rest with us this day, in this place, at this time, as we lift up every joy, every gladness, as we hold up every hurt, every sadness, spoken in this good company, as well as every secret feeling held quiet in the hollows of our hearts. O God of our hands and hearts, help us to see that this world is very incomplete and needs our presence. Help us use our minds that we have been given and have developed to think clearly and reason well. Teach us to listen to our hearts as they beat not alone for ourselves but also for humanity. May we increase our love as love is of the heart. With our hands, help us focus on the essential work of the world that ever awaits our caring touch in the eternal cause of freedom. By seeing with our eyes and thinking with our heads, or loving with our hearts, the work of the world is always awaiting our hands. Spirit of life, bring forth peace where there is fear. Bring forth healing to those who are injured or sick, and solace to the bereaved. Bring forth courage for all those who are risking their lives to help others. Bring forth generosity of spirit and substance to aid those in need. Transform our broken hearts so that we might be agents of love in the coming days and months. In the name of all that is holy and life-affirming and life-sustaining, we say, Shalom, Salam, Om Shanti, Sat Sri Akal. Amen. Blessed be. As we enter a few moments of silence together, those among us mourning the loss of a loved one or commemorating the anniversary of a loss are invited to rise in body and or in spirit and to remain rising until the hymn. Let us enter the silence together.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh little soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul.
All right. Well, this is one of my favorite services. that I actually look forward to every year, both with excitement and some trepidation. For those of you who are new to Unitarian Universalism or this religious community, this is part of our tradition that many of my colleagues like to engage in, not because we are gluttons for punishment or we want to shine in our ignorance, though some of those do happen from time to time, but more as a way of honoring who we are as a religious community. UU theologian James Luther Adams liked to say that we are a priesthood and prophethood of all believers. And in that sense, indicating that there is no hierarchy between the pulpit and the pew, that somehow those who are called to professional ministry are somehow higher or better or superior to the lay people who really are our faith, or somehow we carry special wisdom that we dispense, that you are supposed to not only partake but practice, but that we bring a relationship of shared ministry. And that as a faith that is committed to both reason and passion, faith and intellect, that we engage in the questions, or as one of our hymns celebrates, to question is an answer. So that's sort of a prologue for our annual question box service. I want to assure you I did not look at any of these questions up until just now when Carolyn handed them to me, and which is as it should be, so that I can be surprised or stumped, as the case may be. Carolyn has graciously sorted them quickly by theme and subject, and I'll try to get to as many as these questions as time allows. So with that, oh, thank you. That's why we have worship associates, you see, because they know I need all the help I can get. Thank you. This is a great question to start us off, and I thank the person who came up with this question in advance. Why do kids have to sit in service? That is a very good question. So, as a worshiping community, we welcome people of all ages to join in worship. Even though we have religious education programming for our children and our youth, happening sometimes simultaneously with worship, we also have worship that's open to everyone. This morning, for example, we have among us children and youth, which is great. I was delighted to see some of them walking in. Now, do they have to sit in service? Okay. And that's the answer I think that particular parent's child needed to hear. But having said that, worship is a collective act that a community engages in. Every Sunday, it is the focal point of our coming together, our being together, and our being a community of spirit and service. And it is through that act that we feel and experience not just the sense of our own community, but the sense of the holy. Whatever you may wish to call it or not, it is still present. And by learning to do that, we develop a deeper connection to our faith community, which is why worship is one of the most important corporate acts that any religious community, whatever the theological stripe, engages in. So I would encourage our children and youth to recognize the importance, even though I recognize the things we do will bore you to tears. I know that. I feel that sometimes. As I am preaching, I think, what on earth am I subjecting them to? So I appreciate your patience and your willingness to work with us and learning to be in community together. And also for adults to learn, to stretch a bit, to not just see somehow that this space is our copyrighted space and that children are an intrusion somehow, just because they make a comment or may gurgle or cry or laugh or are restless. Finding ways to still be present and still is part of our spiritual practice. And when we do that well, we become truly a multi-generational worshiping community. So thank you for that good question. Will church have more activities in third grade? That is a very specific question. And I see Tim Atkins, our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, going, thumbs up, yes. What's with the doors locked? Yes, indeed. We've been having some software issues with the building locks, partly because it's rather dated software, and also because we're trying to transition to a new system with ADT. You may have seen some good security measures being put in place, thanks in part to a very generous grant from the Montgomery County that we received, a matching grant that we were able to put to good use. So we're now transitioning from the old system to the new system, and you happen to be in that liminal space this weekend. So thank you for your patience. That's why we're trying to keep the doors propped open or coming up with other solutions while we make that transition, which hopefully will be done this week. Why aren't more of the social justice activities of Cedar Lane mentioned on the website? That is also a very good question. As some of you may know, we transitioned to a new website last year. And while a lot of hard work went into it, and it was intended to be a creative, interactive platform that would not only be a way for us to know more about what's happening within our community, a source of information, but also, more importantly, be a portal to the world, to tell the world who we are and what we're about and what we're engaged in. It is still a work in progress. And over the summer, our Director of Communications and Membership Engagement, Sarah Davidson, made some good changes and additions to the website, and you will be seeing more of them, including a more comprehensive list and description of the many social justice ministries we are engaged in. All right, this is I'm very concerned about the pledge drive shortfall. Why do you think that has happened? The capital campaign did well. Was it a mistake to do both? Was it a mistake to do both fund drives at the same time? Thank you for that question. Yes, we are looking at a gap between what we aspired to raise through our annual campaign this year and where we are right now. The stewardship and capital campaign team has been working very hard to reach out to you, members of this religious community, to fulfill your commitments. I don't know what has happened. One of the reasons that you have raised in your question, whether doing both the capital campaign and the annual campaign at the same time may have impacted people's pledges. It could be a reason, though I don't think that's the only reason. People have responded very generously. Some people have pledged incredibly generously, not just to the annual campaign, but also to the capital campaign. So that's also been at play. And also some folks have not been responding to calls, especially because we are trying something different this year, which was to find time to meet with everyone, to actually sit down and have a conversation about what this community means to you. What is it that you value? What is it that you are willing to invest your time, energy, and treasure in making happen? That takes time, but those have been incredibly meaningful conversations that in turn has given us some very good feedback about where we are, how we're doing, what are things that we ought to be thinking more about. But that does take time, but eventually we will only succeed if you respond. So I will use this opportunity for, as this question allows, to say if you have not yet made a pledge this year, please do so. Because what it does is allows us to then focus on our mission and our ministry and not worry about where we're going to find the resources to make our mission and ministry happen, so that we can be engaged in the actual work of why we are here as a religious community. So thank you again for asking this question. What is your secret to holding strong in your faith and belief in joy and all things good with the world, as scary as it currently is? Ooh. I should have read the question first before I started. Wow. I wish I can say I have a secret, because if I did, I'd be happy to share it with you. And yes, these are trying times, and I have had a few crises of faith. While I remain a hopeful pessimist, sometimes the pessimism takes over my hopefulness. What I try not to do is slide into cynicism, which is a risk I know I run. What I'd seek to remind myself, and this is where my faith, my Unitarian Universalist Hindu faith, supports and guides me, is to remember that despite all the challenges and trials and tribulations that we encounter in life, life is still worth living. That there is always joy and hope in life. Despite all the tragedy that we encounter, despite the despair and the hopelessness that we see happening all around us, there is still an opportunity for us to say yes to life. And to recognize that I am not somehow in this all by myself, or that I don't have any support, or that somehow I have to figure everything out by myself. And which is where a deep and sustaining belief that I carry in the holy that I'm comfortable naming God provides me sometimes with that grounding that I sometimes don't feel when I am swept by all that's happening in the world. And when I actually remind myself to breathe and to remember that, and to recognize that I am engaged in this with others, you, for example, it gives me the energy to stay present and to carry forward, even if there doesn't seem to be a clear path forward. Why bother to attend worship services when we are doing so much good elsewhere through Cedar Lane? That is a good question. I think I may have touched on this at the beginning itself. So, as Unitarian Universalists, we are all for doing. You know, one of our mottos is, where deeds, not creeds, guide our lives. We have always been action-oriented, onward and upward forever, as James Freeman Clarke once proudly proclaimed in the early 19th century. Well, when we are all about action and don't spend enough time nurturing the internal reservoir that gives us the energy and motivation to be engaged, our spirits will wither and die. It is as simple as that. So the challenge of being in religious community is finding balance between being and doing. If we just focused on being, all we are about is getting together and chanting Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, well, that's rather self-absorbing, even narcissistic, selfish. And if we're only about going out and saving the world, well, that's not right either. So it's finding the right balance. So that's why we say, enter to worship, depart to serve. Worship, service. Or as the Quakers said, after worship, the service begins. And resist. How do I pick up myself when I know I have been lost for so long? This is where a religious community is so important. I've said this many times. Unitarian Universalism saves lives. How do I know that? Because it has saved my life. It doesn't save souls, friends. Let me be clear about that. But it does save lives. The salvific power of religious community, of our being imperfect beings on this imperfect and glorious journey called life, and going about it together, is to me one of the ways we learn to move out of our sense of isolation and really be able to build and sustain community. Because community is not just about feeling warm and fuzzy together. It is also about building real connections together, learning to sit with, live with, and work our way through our spiritual discomfort together, whatever it is that contributes to that. And that's what we're about. We do that imperfectly. We make mistakes all the time. But at the end of the day, Cedar Lane saves lives. How do you learn to extend universal love to people who have done really terrible things? Example, rape, murder, abuser, etc. That's a very good question. And it's a very difficult question. To me, one of the most difficult questions that point to our first principle, which calls us to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. No exceptions. There is no comma or but after that principle. We choose to put something there. It is a foundational principle that comes out of both our Universalist and our Unitarian heritages. And to me, that is one of the most difficult principles to seek to embody. But as spiritual practices go, we need to learn ways to develop those spiritual muscles that allow us to be able to be present to people who challenge us, who do damage, considerable damage. Like, for example, we are all horrified by the latest report that came out of Pennsylvania about the child sex abuse scandal that's rocking the Catholic Church. While we all recognize the extent to which this damage has caused and created situations in people's lives that are at times are irreparable, and we need to hold people and the institution to account for not doing enough in a timely way to address and respond to these crises, we also need to recognize that this just doesn't pertain just to the Catholic Church and somehow feel that we are all okay. No, this affects every religious community, including Unitarian Universalism. And how we take these kinds of issues seriously, creating channels by which we work toward developing right relationships while being present to the real pain and grief and sorrow and loss that people bring because of the damage caused, is to me one of the essential tasks that we have before us. So, I'm going to shift to this pile for a minute since we are almost at the end of the hour. How can we get the congregation to wear their pronoun stickers? That's a good question. For those of you who are new to us, we have been trying for months now to get everyone to wear their preferred pronoun. How is it that they wish to be called, to be known? Not ascribing a pronoun to people. Why are we doing this? Because we are committed to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, including those of our siblings who identify as trans or genderqueer or gender fluid or are questioning their own identity. So it is an invitation, not a requirement, and an opportunity for us to actually get to know one another in a more meaningful way and not just make assumptions about each other based on how we present ourselves. So I would invite you to kind of soften your stance, if you have been somewhat critical about it, to see that as an invitation and see what happens. Or engage with someone about whom you thought or you had assigned a certain pronoun and found something else, to actually get to know that person. So please see this as an invitation and a request, and we have plenty of stickers at the back that Lisa Chernikoff is holding up. All right. How do we as a congregation recognize our place of privilege when continuing our social justice work? Well, that's a wonderful question. We have privilege. There's nothing wrong about having privilege. To me, the challenge is not recognizing that we have privilege, or worse, denying that we have privilege. So, as Unitarian Universalists, who are highly educated, many of whom have at least an undergraduate degree, if not one, if not multiple master's or doctoral degrees, who, for all intents and purposes, have really good, well-paying jobs for the most part. I'm not saying all of us are blessed that way, no, but many of us are, who are of a certain socio-economic situation, who also happen to be predominantly Euro-American, we come with some built-in privileges that we didn't ask for. We just happen to have them. Our task is to recognize those and see how we might put them to good use, not out of guilt. We don't try to do guilt, at least in Unitarian Universalism, even though I do try it sometimes during the annual campaign, but I don't get very far, so I've stopped trying. But to recognize that we are endowed with certain privileges that we are called not only to be attendant to, but to apply them, bring them to bear, while also doing the more deeper, difficult work of sharing those privileges in ways that we actually work toward creating a more equitable society. That's a really big ask. And the way we do it is through our social justice work. And that is what we seek to do together as a community. All right, I think we're past the hour, so I'm going to pause here and thank you all for your excellent questions, including the ones I was not able to get to. I think I did get to a few of them, and I appreciate your willingness to sit through and listen to my ramblings and your patience. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And to be continued, we will, of course, try to compile all these questions, the ones that were answered this morning and those that I didn't get to, and try to share that list with you in one of the upcoming e-news. So you have a chance to actually see the breadth of wonderful questions that you brought together for this service. With that, I'd like to invite our ushers to come forward to give and receive an offering to sustain the mission and ministry of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church, and also the mission and ministry of Action in Montgomery, AIM. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
For the gifts we have given and for the gifts that we are, we offer gratitude for the contributions to the work of this ministry. And we bow to the spirit of generosity and faith that make courage and compassion the cornerstones of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. Thank you for your generosity. Please rise in body and or in spirit to sing hymn number 1024, When the Spirit Says Do, in your teal hymnal.
And I'd like you to put those hymnals down. Put them in your chairs. You know this song, and I'm going to feed you the lyrics, which start when the Spirit says do. And you can clap, and you can groove, and you can move, because Todd plays in a jazz band, and he likes to see people smile at him. All right, so here we go. You've got to swing when the Spirit says do. You've got to woo when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do. And Lord, you've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Sing. You got to sing when the Spirit says do. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you've got to sing, Lord. You've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. 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 Shout. You've got to shout when the Spirit says, I can't hear you. You've got to shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you've got to shout. Lord, you've got to shout when the Spirit says shout. 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 Laugh. We got to laugh when the Spirit says laugh. Ha ha ha. Got to laugh when the Spirit says woo, woo, woo. When the Spirit says laugh, you've got to do it. Lord, you've got to laugh when the Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh. Spirit says, are you laughing? Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh. Spirit says laugh. We're going to do one more time. You got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do. Lord, you've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Yeah.
Please remain as you are for these closing words from Rainer Maria Rilke. But before I do, I just want to give you a taste of some of the questions I didn't get to, which are really good. Why do good things happen to bad people? Do you have a lost and found department for souls, for your faith? Many of my friends have an interest in Cedar Lane. What are the best points I can make with them about this community? Catholic priests, celibacy. When will the church recognize women? Hopefully soon. Do you think God is definable or undefinable, or could it be both? How do you know if it's a coincidence or God? What is the place of being nice in Unitarian Universalism? It's a core practice. Sorry. Does anyone really believe in universalism? I mean, if there actually is a heaven Do we think Hitler, Stalin, or even a particularly boring neighbor will be there? That's a good one. How do we continue to live by UU principles when they are not as well known by many people in our congregation? Should our social justice ministry include low-profile issues, such as proposing the practice of some businesses to refuse to adopt cash purchases for purchases? I'm sorry, my eyes are not working. How do we encourage relationships to increase social justice activism? Do UUs resist injustice? And please speak about what is our spiritual connection, duty, to the ongoing prison strikes. Wow. Thank you. All this could be a whole nother service. I thank you for your questions. And Rilke says, have patience with everything unresolved in your heart and to try to love the questions themselves, as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for answers which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. So live the questions now. Go in peace. Go making peace. Live gently, love mightily, and bow to the mystery. Take it away, Dr. Sgrecci.